I go into the secret part.
Yeah. Jeff said the magic word, subsidiarity. I think that's up to the diocese to figure out what they want to do with it.
So they can decline to send it? That would be the subsidiary, I guess.
It's not, were you saying the godly admonition as being
Going on
a discipline that would have to go to
the list? Did I
It
say
doesn't
diocese?
go
I
anywhere.
meant, yeah, do you have to send it
No,
to headquarters?
It's
No.
only conviction you have to.
only the convictions.
Okay.
Or someone who
Submits.
submits. Those have to be sent. A sentence for someone who is submitted, or a sentence with a conviction.
Okay, thanks. That was the answer.
If the question were, where is it sequestered away or hidden, we should ask Raymond to tell us about what he had to do to get something out of a different denomination that I won't name publicly. But it's a great story, but it was instructive to me.
Can you give us some examples of others that you've used as investigators before? You said that law enforcement was not necessarily the best to call as an investigator. So what professions have you used?
Well, there are a lot of people that offer investigative services. Some of those are prior law enforcement officials, but you want someone who has a high enough capacity, rather than just trying to get a conviction. In a lot of law enforcement background people, that's going to be their status quo, is going to be their default position. And so it depends on what the nature of the case would be, but this is just that one particular instance. But there are a lot of good investigative agencies. There are other people in your diocese that may have legal training. You know, somebody that had been a high enough level paralegal or some other type person who was
James Comey.
professional. Who?
James Comey.
Oh, okay. Well, no comment. But you know, but if you had a lawyer who was willing to do that and serve in that way, that would be
Still,
be fine. But Christians,
can we hire you as their
One case I was involved interviewing 3 elderly ladies. And I was lucky in that, we were lucky in that particular case, but in that parish, there was a member, a prominent member, who just was a retired psychiatric nurse. And she actually knew the ladies in question. And she was sent in as the bishop. This is prior to any presentment, we're just talking about informal. And she interviewed, because there was a feeling that if the bishop initially interviewed, it would be awkward. So you really have to look at the resources. And we were lucky in that case. She helped us resolve it.
It's a great example of just thinking creatively. Who do you have available? And you know, my wife likes to say, when your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. It's really good to be thinking, what's the problem?
Yeah.
And then, do we have tools we haven't even thought about using that we can use? My quick answer to your question is the one I've had used the most are computer forensics investigators. But there are people who are experienced investigating child abuse situations, for example. One of my law partners was the guy who at Department of Justice for 10 years trained their investigators in investigating issues of sexual abuse. And so, you know, we'll deal with situations and he'll say, yeah, let me call so-and-so who I used as an investigator 10 years ago, and we'll hire them and get them to work. Hopefully that's never what you're dealing with at a diocesan level. Hopefully it's where you can just call on someone who's existing in the diocese.
So just simplistically then, the goal of the investigation is to establish the facts, not make the case.
Yes.
Is that a distinction?
I believe.
Okay.
I have a question. It would seem a lot of these sexual abuse cases, which I think are prevalent, we don't know about it, are going to run hand in hand with criminal prosecutions. How is this going to affect the process in the diocese of the trial stage or the admonition stage?
I'll take a first run at that. My general approach is, if it is potentially criminal activity, you have to make a threshold question: does this need to be reported by us or by someone else who's known to us has it already been reported? And then you have to coordinate with law enforcement, because the last thing you want to do is interfere with a law enforcement or criminal investigation. Once you know those facts, then you have to say, okay, how can our process work in as effective a way as possible while being consistent with those obligations? So if it's a criminal investigation of child abuse or a form of sexual assault or something like that, I start asking the questions, will that evidence be available and usable for the following disciplinary proceedings? If not, is there a way to make sure that it's preserved, or that we can come in on the tail of that process and do our own investigation? My instinct, and this is one where I think the assemblage of counselors will be important, my instinct is, if it's serious enough for there to be a significant criminal investigation, it's quite possible that that person will voluntarily submit to discipline or will renounce. That can create some issues. And again, here I think our friend Raymond Dake has had some experience thinking about what can be done, because the ecclesiastical disciplinary process may have implications in the criminal process for the accused that put those a little bit at odds. And so you have to walk through that carefully. And I'd say situations like that, again, this is why this network is so good. My first phone call, I'd probably call Ray and say, Ray, you've already walked that path. Help me learn from all you had to learn to go through that.
Yeah, just one thing, if it's a situation where, for instance, maybe the bishop has already taken the preventive action and suspended, or is about to do that. If there's any suggestion, in the cases I've been involved in, it may never go to criminal. If it's going to move to criminal, you might very well say to the bishop, suspend that clergy, and that's it. We're not doing anything else. We're not doing any more. It's in the, if it's going to the police, then you protected that particular parish, you take the preventive action, you remove that, if it's a clergy person, from that situation, and maybe we just stop at that point, and it goes to the secular authorities.
I have one other question. I hate to keep.
Can we'll circle back to you. So we're going to Ross and then Mark and then.
You talked a little bit, Jeff, about the bishop actually meeting with the accuser in the credibility determination stage. Would it be appropriate for the bishop to speak with anybody else, or does that then become an investigation that you need to notify the accused of?
That's not an investigation yet. And our canon now says the bishop shall, whenever possible, meet with the accused to make that determination early on. Because if you make the wrong determination early on, and you let a non-credible accusation and a non-credible accuser go forward, then you may already be way deep before you know it. So this is one of the good things that comes out of making that determination early.
My question is, could he meet with anybody else?
Should the bishop meet with anybody?
At that time, is it appropriate for the bishop to go to somebody, Mary Smith says, well, Tommy Jones saw this. Is it appropriate for the bishop to talk to Tommy Jones, or just to stop with the accuser?
I would suggest someone who is a early pre-process investigator to make that contact, and not the bishop.
And you don't have to, that's still not an investigation where you have to notify the
Well,
accuser?
it's a pre accusation investigation.
Okay.
Just one quick thought on that. Principle that's important to keep in mind is protect your bishop. And that doesn't mean protect your bishop in the way of cover up. That means think about, how do you keep your bishop from being a witness when your bishop has to be a decision maker, a sentence imposer. So oftentimes if the bishop needs to meet with the person, always have someone with the bishop, and then often have that person carry the water. So in one instance, we had to transport a computer that had been turned over. Chain of custody. I didn't want the bishop as the only person with the chain of custody for the computer. So you have a couple of other people who can vouch for each other, who say, yes, we picked it up from this person, we delivered it to the forensic investigator, chain of custody we can both certify, and the bishop's not in that loop, or the bishop's only in that loop with someone else. Canon Phil gave us the high sign that we are just about out of time. So let's do this, we can stop here. Happy to, those of us who can stay around to put our heads together on other questions.